Welcome to the Social Value Leadership Group's podcast as we celebrate Social Value Week 2024. My name is Kelly Thomas. I'm the Social Value and Fundraising Manager at MTVH. And today I am your host. And today we will be tackling a very important question. Is the housing sector still innovating employment and training solutions to meet the needs of our residents for the future? Joining us today, we have two experts in the field, Dominic Briant, Director of Community Impact at MTVH, and Victoria Whittle, Head of Employment and Training at Clarion. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you here. So before we start, I wanted to set the scene about what kind of climate we are and where we are in terms of who are our residents and our customers that we are serving. So I just want to give some context to the audience, that people at home that might be listening in. So anything that's noted here will be shared in the notes below. I feel like a real podcaster saying that in the script below. So this is in reference to the Better Social Housing Review. Some of these facts are, so in England, we know 17% of the population live in social housing, with a great proportion of people living in social housing have additional and complex needs. We also know that a lot of our customers are from the global majority, which includes that are also disabled and single parents. This isn't to say that many residents don't work and pay their rent and positively contribute to society. And we saw that in the pandemic, where we know that a lot of our residents were classed as essential workers. Our residents do have complex and challenging needs when they want to enter the labour market. And with childcare, caring responsibilities, health and disabilities, all playing a part in sustaining employment. I think that's a really important point around sustainable employment. The sector itself has a long history of providing support, and Communities at Work noted that £70 million annually is invested in the sector to support people in employment services. So, Victoria, I turn to you and I ask you the first question. Could you tell us if employment and training offered by the sector has evolved and adapted to meet the needs of our customers now and in the future?
The simple answer is yes. I think we have, most definitely, as a housing sector, evolved and really kind of focused very much on the needs of our residents in relation to employment training skills. Certainly, I know that we have a number of opportunities that we have explored, both as individual housing associations, but also collectively and collaboratively. And I think it's a clear sign that we are responding to a need. The whole kind of social, economic and political agenda and landscape has changed. And actually, if we are going to do justice to our residents, we've got to change as well. We've got to be there to be able to kind of support them. So we've been looking at working with our residents for some time now. And actually, it's become more and more difficult because actually you've got to understand what it is that residents need. And you've got to be in that space where you can actually kind of really sort of work with them and interact with them to be able to get that. What we do know is that people do want to work. Our residents want to work. But there are challenges that they're facing. Like any resident, be it social housing resident or, private resident, they all face similar challenges. Some of the things that we look to do is actually work on the basis, right? Some will come in as entry level.
Yeah.
Some will want to be upskilled. There are some of our residents that are in work, but are in work poverty.
Absolutely.
So there's different areas, different strands that we need to be looking at. And I think as a housing sector, we are well placed to respond to all these different challenges within our housing stock and our resident stock. So I certainly think that, yes, it's a need. I think we've developed a number of programs. The one that's been most recent collaborative program that we had, which came to an end last year, was Love London Working. And that was funded through European Social Fund and managed by the Greater London Council. And it was looking very much at trying to engage our residents, housing association residents, to move them into training and to meaningful employment and sustainable employment. And it took all of 8 years to be
Yeah,
for
a
us to be
long
able to
time.
achieve what we wanted to achieve. And I think there was much more groundwork we would have done had more funding been available. But what we certainly managed as 9 housing associations working together was to engage with over 25,000 residents. We supported 8,700 into employment and trained a huge number of residents. And I think that shows that there is a need out there, and that shows that we are responsive. It is about going there. It's going to the resident and meeting them at that place. And I think as a housing sector, we've cracked that.
Good, I like that. That's a good point to bring Dom in. And as you talked about Love London Working, and other programs that you have like Job Plus and stuff, and I know that with a lot of European funding cut away, some of those programs do cut. And like as you said, in 8 years you were able to do such all these amazing things, but actually when you get to that, we're really making progress. The funding goes. Dom, I just think this is a good point to bring you in. I know that you've run resident-led employment programs, especially trials in the Midlands. What did you learn, and how can residents be more involved in shaping future employment services?
So I think building on Victoria's points about the changing needs of communities, when we think about people who are in social and affordable homes, it's as many different stories and situations as you can imagine. It's people that are extremely highly skilled in careers, sometimes not the ones they want to be in, all the way through to people that are really struggling with day-to-day life, and the prospect of work is quite far away from them. And then something that we share in common is that housing associations and residents think long term. Generally, people tend to be in communities for a long time, and we tend to serve those communities for a long time. And yet programs, whether they're funded by government or other bodies, tend to think short term.
Yeah.
And whatever they are, they tend to make assumptions about the needs that people have. And in the past, there has been a dominance of programs that are about people who are out of work. And that's not the only story, and that's not the only experience. So we knew, and our partners in Clarion and others knew, that some of those funding programs, particularly European Union funding programs, were coming to an end last year. We took the time through some of our supply chain sponsorship and some of our corporate partnerships to take some flexible funding to see what a neighbourhood thinks and what a neighbourhood wants and what a neighbour could do together. So in Brewster's Estates in St Anne's in Nottingham City, somewhere where we've got a long history of serving that community, we opened it up. We opened the floor up to residents and those that are passionate about economic opportunities, skills, business ideas, and also those that know who are out of work and struggling, with some design consultants and some people that know how to hold really good listening conversations to ask those questions. And I think that a program's successful when you physically can't fit people that want to come into the spaces that you're running at, places like our community centre in Hillview. So by the end of that program of engagement and narrowing down ideas, the ideas were beautiful and simple. It was things like a regular cafe where people thinking about work, whether they're in work or not, can meet employers and just simply get an understanding and experience of what's behind a job advert and what's behind a role. Opportunities to try things differently, whether you're switching careers or whether you're worried about stepping back into the workplace after a long time out. So ideas like that were generated that actually, funnily enough, are fairly easy to sustain and fairly easy to build upon, and actually take some of the struggles out of all of the thinking if you put them in people's hands.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, we just want to kind of add, yes, to what Dom's saying, actually, in terms of kind of going out, and being there in the community. So we have recently become engaged in a pilot called Jobs Plus, and that is looking at taking the service to the residents, to the community. And so it's almost kind of like a one-stop shop. So it's there, resident can come into a community hub and they will get support with CV, they'll get support with digital skills, We'll bring other agencies in, so there'll be kind of Mind that will support them with kind of sort of mental health and challenges they may have. So it's just bringing the services to the individual rather than them having to
a
go
real
out and
local
find it all.
approach. Yeah.
And we've only started kind of been piloting this since July, but actually it's had a massive impact. We run 2 pilots, one in Borehamwood in Hertfordshire and the other in Penge in Bromley, both of which have attracted over 40 people and in a short space of time. So people want to work. They want to move on. They want to be able to kind of face those challenges. And I think that we're just so prime and a prime position to be able to kind of make that happen.
I like that point, Victoria. It gives me a good segue into my next question, because we spoke about, and Dom, you shared as well, and both of you have shared that we know that residents do want to go back into work, and we're seeing once we run programs that have a really local approach. And I know ever since, and I've worked in the sector for over 10 years, that actually all of our programs have been quite local. We're running services in community centres. We have that kind of job plus approach in our centres. Why have we seen now in more recently, I guess, where European funding has been removed, a lot of housing associations have rolled back their employment services, with some housing associations not even having employment teams?
I'm happy to start on
Go
an
on,
answer
Dom.
to that one. I think the housing sector is going through a transition, including the social housing sector and organisations like our own. Quite rightly, we have high expectations from residents and communities about building safety, around standards of homes, around the ability to heat homes in the future. So organisations are having to change to do that and quite frankly, fund it. And I think some organisations are, in a sense, responding to that crisis in their own organisations and in the communities that are around them. We haven't built enough homes over 30, 40 years, and we haven't maintained them well enough. And that's not just social housing organisations, that's the private rented sector as well. So I think there are some organisations that are responding head on to the housing crisis. But I think that for some of us, we need to continue to think long term. So we know we need to build more homes. We have a government that is targeting more home building in a really ambitious way. We're talking about many, many more hundreds of thousands of homes over the next 5 years through planning reforms. But planning reforms alone are not going to do that. We need to think about, right now, we don't have enough skilled trades and we have labour shortages in building homes. So where's that going to come from? If you think about where homes are going to be built, those are changing communities, changing local economies in which people need to play a part and need employment and need a future, whether that's the skill and the role they have now or the ability to adapt and change. And I think for those of us that have maintained the ability to think long term, we need to think about that. We need to think about that mix. It's not just about the needs of today. It's about, if we're going to have more social and affordable homes in 5 to 10 years' time, there is a lot more than just bricks and mortar involved in that.
Can I, Victoria, do you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just kind of on the back of what Dom's saying is, most definitely. I think we've got to think about where are the gaps, and particularly the skill gaps. And it is quite interesting because it's not that it's new, but the gaps change and they grow. And so therefore we need to look like, kind of building and developing construction. We need to be thinking about, how are we going to source this? How are we going to make sure that we build these homes? And once we built them, how are they going to be maintained? How, who's going to do the maintenance? And that's again some of the work that we're doing with our contractors and with our residents, in terms of kind of looking at, how do we kind of skill a workforce? How do we get our residents into appropriate jobs, meaningful jobs, and jobs that they can grow and develop their skills in? And
so they have really a career, right?
And they have a career path, absolutely.
Because I think the thing that I see as well, because I think there's that direct correlation between somebody we need to build these homes. We've got all of these works, fire safety, damp and mold works that need to be done. We've got the green agenda where we need to look at our sustainability. But how are we preparing our residents in our communities for some of these opportunities as well? And sometimes the offerings that we do get are sometimes work that actually maybe not what people want to go into. Like sometimes we get, we've got a labouring role for a position, and actually there's a whole breadth of opportunity whether they're working in the built environment to say, actually, have you considered this? And actually, Victoria, touching on your point where we're saying, actually, we want people to have a career. How are we in skilling up people to say, actually, you know what, you could become a site manager, you could become a surveyor, and actually taking on that training to develop that pathway for themselves to go, actually, I started here, but look at my trajectory, and actually building that social mobility in our community. So I think it's a real point, and I'm glad that actually we're responding to that. Dom, I know that social value generates a breadth of opportunity and countless skills and training opportunities for residents as well. But is the sector fully making use of those opportunities that are generated through social value to support our residents back into work?
I think, like a lot of things connected to sustainability, so the change that we need to make in society for our communities to adapt and thrive to the changes that are coming, I think there's almost sort of three camps that have emerged. One is those that want to bury their head in the sand and think that nothing's wrong and we can carry on as we are. That's probably not us, and that's probably not the sort of supply chain and our partners, commercial partners, that we want to work with. But there's those that are up for change but don't know how to do it, and I think we've got a role to play in helping people to do it. I think both MTVH and Clarion are leaders in social value, not just within the social housing sector, but within social value in general. And I would say that of the social value leadership group as well. Generally, when we engage with anyone, whether it's a resident who wants to understand social value in their community, all the way through to investment institutions that want to fund sustainable investments, they are impressed by the way we think at a grounded level. Then there's that third group of people who want to lead the change. And so what that's meant is that for us and others, that social value commitments are not a nice to do, and they haven't been for a long time. We'll both know of contractors where it's as an important element in their contract and our commercial agreement between us as it is anything else. So I think that for me, the opportunity to bring more people to that way of thinking, to join that change is a massive opportunity, because I think the people that we have the strongest social value relationships with, some of our contractors, it tends to work for everybody, right? It works for residents, it works for communities, it works for them commercially because they get good work and good business in the long term, but it also works for their teams. Their teams seem to like employing local people, equipping people with skills, giving back to what really matters to neighbourhoods. And we as a collective have made it easier for them to do that, and to do that in a way that's affordable. I do think from an opportunity point of view, we do have some really big contracts, and in a way it's easier with the big contracts and the big supply chain opportunities we have and the big projects we have. When it comes to smaller everyday work, whether it's people that are smaller on our supply chain list, or whether it's neighbourhoods where they don't have big multi-billion pound regeneration programs, I think that's where we've still got to really embed it, and that's the work of the next 10 years, isn't it?
Sure. I've come back to my mind what I wanted to say to you, Dom. And I just want to follow on and touch on one of the points that you made, Dom, around while we're having a rollback of services where other housing associations cannot fund employment teams. And I know one of the words that I hear often around housing associations, actually, we're community anchor organisations, right? We want to be an anchor in our community. We know we can't. One of the things I know I talk about when I talk about social value, we're not a silo, we're not a monolith. Actually, we know it's really about partnership and collaboration. Where we have seen the rollback of services is there potential in the future for us to look at more collaborations between other housing associations to say, actually, if I know another housing association hasn't got services, how can I still provide services to that community when nobody does get left behind? I know in the past we've worked where we can only work with our particular residents, but how can we ensure that actually as a community anchor organisation, we're making sure that everyone from the community benefits from our relationships, whether that's through social value or our employment offer?
So for me, it takes a village, and we're going to be in that village for a long time to come, and we've got a long history of being there. Both MTVH and Clarion have got a good track record in drawing partners together and drawing money together. There's a lot that you can do that doesn't take money, but money does help things scale up and help sustain things for the long term. What we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is a bit of a rolling back in communities of voluntary and community sector grant funding from local authorities. We've seen a change in the way that government accesses bigger funds. And also I think some of the sort of charity funding is not equally distributed and sometimes not distributed to where it really needs to go. Well, that's not a surprise to us. We know that. We see that every day because we're in those communities and we're working alongside people that are trying to make a difference. So for us, this year we've established the Molly Huggins Foundation, where we've set ourselves the aspiration over the next 10 years of increasing our fundraising efforts by 50%. So that'll be £75 million over the next 10 years. The way that we're going to piece that together is by drawing funding into communities where it isn't there, by making funding stretch, including our own money, by putting our colleague and our supply chain efforts towards shared goals, and through working in partnership in the way that we probably always have with Clarion. I know that Clarion, you are a few steps down that line.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a model that is being adopted by a number of housing associations. I think we have to.
Yeah.
If we want to meet the needs of our residents, we've got to kind of find a different way of doing it. And we've actually gone. We've had the large collaborations like Love London Working. We've had smaller partnerships, and we know if we want to reach all our customers, we're going to have to come together and work together. I think working in silo is kind of long gone.
Yeah.
And certainly in terms of kind of joint funding opportunities, we don't know what the financial landscape is going to look like at the moment. Budget has been announced. It's great. We know there's a commitment around employment and skills development, but we don't know what's going to come our way. But we've got to make sure that we have a stance and we have a say around the top table. We've got to be able to kind of like try and kind of influence the agenda. And I think we're doing a good job of that.
Yeah.
We're there with the government. We're sitting around the table with them. They know what housing associations can do. They know the value of what we bring in this landscape. And I think it's important that we do continue to look at collaborative working. And there are some things that we may have to do slightly on our own because of it's a small area and it's quite unique to us. But I think the majority of what we do, it is about bringing on board our partners. So working across with our social value contractors, working across programmes. We don't have to work just with Clarion social value contractors, with Clarion properties and with Clarion residents.
Absolutely.
We can do some joint working. And I think we just need to kind of be able to kind of like really kind of experiment and see what we can do. We've done it in the past. We've moved really kind of moved and shifted barriers that would stop us from working together. And we can see and we know that the model works, it's successful. So why not build on that?
I'm so pleased that you both said that, because it gives me reassurance. Actually, the sector's in safe hand with you guys both leading the charge. We talked about the complexities and challenges that our residents face when they're going into employment. From your knowledge and expertise, is there anything around in the future around AI, technology, digital advancements that you kind of think, actually, how can that support residents into work? Are we thinking about that?
It's here. It's not going to go away.
It's not.
And I think with everything else, we've got to respond to that.
Yeah.
So we are looking at AI. We actually run a program around looking at, with our residents, around looking at what AI will bring to the table. What does it mean in terms of opportunities for you? And how do you use Chat GDP.
Well, I think there's loads
Chat
of them
GDP, that's
now,
one.
right?
So how do you use that to your advantage, And what do we do with that? What do you do with that information? So it's about that shift. It's about, okay, new technology. How do we respond to that? How do you respond to that as potential employees? Because they're going to need to. So again, we're going to have to look at what's our offer? Where we might have just done sort of like basic skills training. Do we need to do kind of basic skills training and add a bit of AI, or what do we need to do to be able to kind of make sure that we give them that kind of overall experience that they're going to need? We need to kind of embrace that. And I think, we're talking about changes for our residents, but as employees in the housing sector, we've got to change as well.
Yeah.
So we've got to remain relevant. And these things are going to be there, and we've got to have to make sure that we can respond to them on behalf of our residents and to be able to kind of support the people that we're working with.
Dom, you want to chip in now?
It's a phenomenon, isn't it? It's interesting that it's once you've got digital access, and that's another key thing that we do for a lot of people is help people get digital access. It's in a sense it's democratic because a lot of people have got access to the same tools. So that's an opportunity for us to help people shift beyond things like CV clinics, the bread and butter of the employment support world over the last 10, 15 years, which arguably now is less necessary when people with the right prompts and the right education can generate some of those things themselves and adapt them and shift them. And even with the right prompts, understand what's required of a certain career path or what might be the best way to apply for a job. And so it's that whole shifting of power dynamics from we need to be the holders of the answers.
Yeah.
We don't need to be the holders of the answers. We need to be the guides. We need to help people
direct them,
embrace this, understand the benefits, understand some of the risks involved, and use it together to enjoy doing what we do. And if I think about some of our teams who are brilliant at what they do, they've got nothing to fear, because what it helps them do is make the most of their skills and experience one-to-one with people in an empathetic way, in a compassionate way that AI can't do.
Yeah.
And use AI to do some of the things that are clogging up their day-to-day and are perhaps a bit of a waste of their time. So for me, I think it's here. It's many things, good, bad, ugly, but I think there are enormous opportunities from it.
Yeah.
Good, I like that. The Social Value Leadership Group. So last year, we introduced the Big Six pledges to create some minimum standards for employment opportunities secured through social value. These cover the recruitment process, training, feedback, salary, employment support, in-work work experience. And I guess as well, Dom, it resonated when you spoke about actually your resident-led employment program that you run in Brewster's and Anne's, because actually some of these things are kind of harnessed from what residents have said to us and really shaped and guided us as our response to actually how do we create a difference for residents that want to enter the workplace, and how do we kind of like safeguard that experience through our employment opportunities that we've created through social value. Can either of you talk about why it's really important that employment practice, these 6 pledges need to be adopted by the sector to really ensure that actually employment really works for our residents?
I mean, absolutely. Again, I think it's important because it's about standards. And it's also about expectation. So if we are working with our residents, there's a particular level of standard and expectation they have of us to be able to kind of support them in the right way, to be able to kind of access these opportunities. And so we're doing some work with our supply chain around being able to kind of understand what's around employment rights and accessibility.
Yeah.
And breaking down some of the nuances they have around kind of not quite understanding that, you know, there is that kind of whole pay gender issue that we need to address. So we do try to say to them, look, you've got to understand that we've got to be clear about what it is that you want from an individual. And to be able to do that, you've got to be really kind of, it's got to be standard, it's got to be consistent. So we work with our contractors, we work with all the employers and we make sure that they sign up to a standard.
Yeah.
That, you know, they are very clear. If they're putting a role out, it's very clear about what is expected of that role. And all the information is there and there's nothing hidden. You know, it's all very open. And I think that's really important. And I, you know, as a sector, I think we're the right ones to make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, and I certainly think the Social Value Leadership Group is a conduit for making that happen.
Oh, I'm so pleased that you say that. I think for us, it was really about making sure that actually we know that people's work experience doesn't just start day one when you go in the office and if you go in the office on day one, because we know that's changing. But actually it's that experience for when you see a job advert and you go, I think I'm going to apply. But just giving people that real clarity and real support throughout their journey to say, actually, if we start here, how do I get you to the next phase? And I think for us as a Social Value Leadership Group, it was really important that people feel really supported through that work experience. And actually, for a lot of our contractors, actually, what has been fed back to us is actually some of it we're already doing, but some of it is just about, and there is that bit where actually we're well placed to do it because we hear back from residents to feed back to us to say, this has been my experience, or I applied for a job but I haven't heard back. But actually saying, feedback to someone, give them actionable feedback that allows them to go, actually, I didn't get that job with you, Victoria, but actually I know if I go with that job with Dom, I know what was the barriers, what prevented me from getting that job as well. So really supporting people to make inroads in their journey, their own journey that they want to take as well. So it's really good that you just shouted us.
I mean, it is a two-way process because you give the information, the right information, you're more likely to get the right candidate. And I think that's important. And that's really kind of the selling point to some of the contractors we're working with. Let them know exactly, you know, what your standards are. And if it's consistent, you're going to get a consistent flow of people coming through. And I don't think contractors are adverse to that at all.
No.
It's about that making those changes, those step changes. And for some, it's easier to be done than others.
Yeah.
But I think we will get there.
Yeah. And like you said, if you want the best candidate, you get that if you are able to foster an environment, people feel like I'm wanted, I can thrive in this space as well. But equally, like you say, it's a two-way exchange because sometimes you go, actually, maybe that person's not suited, or actually, I can, as the applicant, can go, actually, I don't think this space is for me. And that's equally okay as well.
That's right.
Dom, how do you think, is there space for the Big Six to still innovate the housing sector's employment offer?
I think there is. I think the great thing about it is it's a reminder of the good basics we have to do every day. It's common sense, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think most of us look at sort of big jazzy employer promises either from ourselves or from the partners we work with, and you got to be skeptical if you're not getting the basic Big Six right. So I think the Big Six is the platform that you build upon, and I think if you're the kind of organisation that can do those things every day and do them well, then what will come from that is innovation. So if you are genuinely taking an interest in people pre-employment as one of the Big Six pledges, you know, you're really helping people feel welcome, understanding their needs and their talents from before they've even stepped through the door. Imagine what's going to happen on day one.
Yeah.
You know, the ideas that people have, the things that they're spotting. It could be a new way of working. It could be, if you think about something like building safety culture, it could be that from day one, they know they're part of, it's everybody's responsibility and they're part of that. And maybe some of the worst case things we've seen happen in the last 15, 20 years might not happen, you know, if everybody feels that they're part of that culture. So yeah, for me, I think that if you get those basics right, you can build some magic on top of it. But if you can't get those basics right, it's like a mirror, isn't it? It's like you want to look at what's coming back in the mirror and say, if we can't do that, we really need to concentrate on getting our house in order.
Yeah. And I think it's also echoes back to us as a sector to say, actually, I know one of the things I always hear, and I always, in our procurement teams as well, we always want organizations, contractors, supply chain partners that have the same culture and ethos as us. Like, who are our partners that really drive to put residents at the heart of their work and really understand the importance that we have for our residents. So, yeah, I think that just mirrors back what, our values are as a sector.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. I think I think we do absolutely brilliant work, to be honest. And I think we sort of underplay it to some extent, but we are quite, in terms of what we bring to the table and how we support our residents, I think, we've got to applaud ourselves as a housing sector. I think there is still room for growth, and there's things, because things are changing, but actually I think we've made some real headroads. And I do think that we should celebrate that, because there are residents that we have changed their lives. We have made a real difference, and making a difference is really important.
Yeah, I mean, we can, both our teams, we can think of moments where we've stepped back and thought, we've worked with the entire household.
Yeah.
So over the course of, so we can talk about strategies, we can talk about funding, we can talk about plans, all the rest of it. But if you actually just distill it down to, hold on a minute, there's an entire family, an entire household here that had different journeys. Some people are struggling, some people had dreams, all the rest of it. And you think our organisations worked with every one of that, and that entire household has transformed its experience. And I've been in those shoes in terms of looking for a different future. And increasingly in some communities, we talk about anchor institutions, we talk about this language, we mean we're it.
Yeah.
We're it. And I think most of the time we are really stepping up to the plate, and we are, I think, pretty humbled to have that relationship with people, and not just listen to people, but actually we've got a real appetite for understanding what people need and what they want.
Yeah. Guys, thank you both so very much. It's really clear that whilst the challenges remain, actually we are responding, we are working in a collaborative way, we're really thinking, we're really trying to innovate to make sure we meet the needs of our customers, not just for now, but in the future. Like I said before, I'm pleased that both Victoria and Dom are leading the charge for some of this change that is much needed in our community. So thank you both for being here today and sharing your views and insights and expertise.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. That wraps up our discussion for today. Thank you for tuning into the Social Value Leadership Group's podcast for Social Value Week 2024. Can't believe we're in our second podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast and intrigued to find out more about the Big Six, you can look below on the show notes. I feel like a real YouTuber when I say that it's official. There's so much more to come from the Social Value Week 2024, so please stay tuned to social media. Thank you for tuning in.